Hello everyone, it's Mari here for Honeybee Stamps. I'm going to be creating this card for you today, and I'm going to start off here with this beautiful 3D embossing folder called Daisy Field. This is just so stunning, and I love that it actually coordinates nicely with the Delicate Daisy A2 cover plate top. So I've cut that top out here. You can see how pretty that is, and I'm going to actually layer it over top of that 3D embossing folder piece here that I've created with this white cardstock. So you can just see how lovely those are. They work beautifully together. I don't know that they necessarily were meant for each other, but they definitely work together. So it's kind of a fun fact. Now I'm going to use a little bit of my Honeybee liquid precision glue and add that onto the back of the cover plate here. I'm going to just lay that onto that embossed piece of white paper, and now I'll just add this onto my card base. My card base is an A2 top folding card base, and I'm just adding a little bit of my Honeybee liquid adhesive onto the back, and I'll go ahead and add this onto the front of that card base. Now the card base is all set to go, and next I'm just going to be adding creating some details to add to the front of this beautiful card base. So pretty. I'm going to be using the gorgeous Spring Wreath stamp and coordinating die set from Honeybee. This is gorgeous. Love this so much. I'm stamping this out in some black VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink onto some Ranger watercolor paper, and I'm going to do a little bit of watercoloring onto this image. So I'm stamping this out with this black ink. This is just a nice crisp slow drying black ink. I'm going to use some clear embossing powder over top. That's just going to keep the image really nice and crisp and black and dimensional actually once I heat emboss this by melting this embossing powder. So this clear embossing powder now is stuck to that black ink. I'm just going to take my heat tool and melt that embossing powder. It's going to create this raised edge on that image, which, like I said, is not only dimensional, but it's really super shiny. I love doing watercolor on an embossed image. So I'm also going to, of course, stamp out the rest of the images that I'm going to be using from that Spring Wreath set. So I'm going to stamp those out just as I did with the wreath, and stamping them again onto some watercolor paper with that same black ink. And I'm going to get those all stamped out. I will use the same clear embossing powder over top of these images. I will again heat these up and melt the embossing powder and create again that just nice shiny raised textured image for my watercoloring. So I'll just finish that up, use my heat tool to go ahead and melt that, and we'll be all ready for some watercoloring here. The watercoloring that I'm going to do today is with Lindy's Magicals, and you could use any watercoloring medium that you like to use for this process. You could use your Distress inks, you could use your Nouveau shimmer powders, whatever you like to use for watercoloring. And so I just have my powders activated with some water in that palette over to the right. I've just picked up some of the pigment with my watercolor brush, and I'm just painting away. And I find this a really easy and relaxing way to color images, and I love doing this with a heat embossed image specifically. So it doesn't take me long to color up all of these different greenery pieces and florals that are part of this gorgeous collection, or this gorgeous stamp set I should say. This color of green that I'm using here is called Edelweiss Moss Green. Like I said, you could use any of your watercolors that you have in your stash for this process. I'm using a little bit of teal on these smaller flowers that are kind of look like a little, almost like a little bit of baby's breath or something like that, but I'm using a little bit of teal. I'll color the centers of those in with a really pretty orangey yellow color. I'm going to use a really pretty bright blue for the largest flowers that are part of this wreath. And I really love that pop of that deep blue. I think it's really pretty. This particular color is called Delphinium Turquoise, and the teal that I used is called Time Travel Teal. The yellow that I'm using is called California Poppy Gold. but you could use literally any of the coloring mediums that you have if you wanted to use the same color palette. I really like combining blue, green, and yellow and teal together in a specific piece, just because I think it just looks, it's a really stunning color palette together. I think the colors really complement each other. And so I really like using that color combo. It's definitely a go-to color combo for me for sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up with that blue. All of my images are almost finished here. I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to a couple of these smaller little areas. And did I say blue? I meant yellow if I said blue. So I'm just finishing up with that yellow there, and that is going to finish up the coloring portion. Now I'm going to go ahead and just layer these die cut smaller pieces onto the wreath, and this is going to make my wreath really nice and dimensional. So I'm using a little bit of foam adhesive on these pieces. Some of them I'm matching up the pieces where I think they kind of look almost exactly the same. So in that way, getting almost like a lovely layer effect here with this wreath. You would not have to do that. You could, I think, just go ahead and add these florals wherever you want. But if you want to add them over top of similar florals to create that layered effect, you could definitely do that as well. So I'm going to just finish up with a few of these smaller little blooms here, and I'm going to kind of go a little bit more random with where I'm putting these just to create more color and more blooms on the project. But I really love how this turned out. I think this wreath is just genius. I love that you can make this dimensional in this way. I think it's really fun, and there's so many different ways that you could color this. You can use any of your favorite go-to coloring techniques to color this in. I just find watercoloring, like I said, super relaxing and probably the easiest coloring technique in my sort of arsenal of coloring techniques. It's definitely my favorite. Now I am going to add a little bit of foam adhesive to the back of this wreath and add that onto that gorgeous card front that I created earlier, just centering that in this way. And now I'm going to use a sentiment from the Daisy Layers bouquet set to finish my card off. Before I do that, I'm going to do just a little bit of quick white splatter, just using a little bit of white paint just to splatter that on and create that little bit of extra detail and dimension on my project. Once that's all dry, like I said, I am going to be using a sentiment from the Daisy Layers bouquet set. That set has just the most amazing sentiments in it. I really love it. I've already used that set a bunch for the sentiments. It is really fantastic. I'm just using a little bit of clear embossing ink to emboss my sentiment here on some black cardstock, and I've used some white embossing powder. I'm going to heat that up and melt that. I'll use the coordinating die to die cut the sentiment out, and that'll be all ready to place onto my project. I'm going to use a little bit of foam adhesive on the back of that black cardstock sentiment just to pop it up and give it a little bit of dimension on my wreath when I go ahead and add this on there. I'm going to add the sentiment to the top right area of my wreath, and I really love how that black cardstock is really going to pop on the really light and dreamy sort of background with that wreath and then that white base. So I'm just pressing that down, and I'll take the release paper off, and then that'll be ready to add onto my project. I'll just grab my my reverse tweezers here to help me place this onto the wreath so that it's as straight as I can possibly get that and position that just where I want it on my project. Now I am going to take some gold stickles and just add a little bit of sparkle and shine to the centers of the different florals, and that's going to finish off my card today. I did link up, friends, in the description box below the video to all of the different products that I've used to create my project. So if you just click the show more section underneath the video, you'll be able to see the links to all of these different products in the Honeybee shop. So I hope you enjoyed my video today. I hope you were inspired. I absolutely love the Simply Spring collection from Honeybee Stamps. I think it's stunning, and I just love working with these products. Have an amazing day, friends. I hope to see you soon. Take care. Stay well. Bye-bye.